Right, let's turn our attention to this 16 minutes past 11 o'clock. A comprehensive new report has unveiled the significant financial challenges faced by Gen Z in the UK. Yorkshire Building Society and Public First conducted the research, and 30% of it has indicated that 16 to 27-year-olds would be unable to afford their monthly outgoings if they were to increase by just £100. This financial vulnerability is notably higher than the 18% of adults overall who would struggle with the same increase. Over a third of Gen Z report having missed at least one debt repayment in the past year, and 52%, that's over 5.1 million individuals, have not saved any income over the past 2 years. Well, joining me to discuss this now is Chris Irwin, who is Director of Savings at Yorkshire Building Society. Chris, thanks very much for joining us. Can you tell us a bit more about this research? Because it's quite concerning.
It is indeed. So the research, as you mentioned, is about Gen Z or Gen Z. For those that don't know, that's people born between 1997 and 2012, and we focus specifically on young people aged 16 to 27. What it reveals is there's a generation, basically, they're actively trying to manage their money, but struggling to do so, whether that's due to spending pressures, a lack of confidence in making financial decisions. The findings are quite stark. They're just facing many more financial hurdles than the previous generations. And that's despite actually many of this generation being the first to benefit from financial education, being added to the curriculum, national curriculum, nearly 10 years ago.
And one of the things, of course, is people would be saying, some people would say, well, it's because they're spending time eating out and fast fashion and things like that. What is their disposable income looking like?
So that's a common, probably I'd say, misconception. So there's a
Hmm.
number of pressures that young people are under, and actually their spending habits are under more financial pressure. Their spending is actually overwhelmingly focused on essential goods and services, and many struggle to afford their outgoings. The stat that you just mentioned there, that 31% of this generation would struggle if their monthly outgoings increased by just £100, kind of shows that maybe that is a misconception, and that just basically kind of managing day-to-day expenditure, incomings and outgoings is a struggle for many.
And you mentioned financial education. You say that they are probably the most financially educated, generation, and yet they still find themselves in this position. What role does that play? I mean, is that they're just saying we're it's open, we're discovering this because they're now telling us what they're doing, or is there something deeper?
I think it's something deeper. So on paper, these are the first generation that should have benefited from that financial education. But there's a few reasons why actually that's not coming through in reality. So part of it is the age they start. It's compulsory for secondary school
Mm.
across England, Scotland, and Wales, but not for primary schools in England. Additionally, 80% of secondary schools in England are now academies, and academies don't have to follow the curriculum in the same way. So there's some challenges with how many young adults will actually be receiving the education. And then additionally, what's the nature and what's the style of that education being provided? Is it more from a numeracy perspective, so understanding interest rates, or is it practical? Is it helping them with things like budgeting and saving and the importance of saving and the impact that might have on your financial well-being? So it's much deeper than just saying it's been on the curriculum. They should have a better education. You've got to look into exactly how that's being applied and whether it's actually being effective.
I want psychologically what the impact of being a cashless society is doing, not only to Gen Z, but also to all of us. The idea that we can so easily spend money now without having to sort of count out the notes.
I think there's two perspectives on this. So mine would be actually I grew up with cash and
Mm,
knowing the physical kind of tangibility of it being in your hands, when you spent it
mm.
was really useful and it helped me to budget. But then equally, if you look at the kind of technology that people have got nowadays and you can use to help you budget and help you manage your finances and you can see everything on a single screen, there's an argument that could say, well, actually that's more useful. So I think it depends on what you've grown up with, what you're used to. Cash can be really beneficial and help people manage their budgets, but equally so can actually the technology.
Mm. And one of the worrying things, of course, you as a director of savings will know this, that people aren't putting money aside if they cannot afford to do that. I mean, what are your tips for encouraging people to at least start that process?
I think the first thing would be is any amount is better than nothing. So even if you really feel like you can't save significant amounts, if you can at least start that habit, that's the thing to focus on. We always talk about a 50-30-20 rule when you think about your budgeting. So 50% of it may be being targeted towards essential spending, so your bills, your housing, your rent. 30% of it being for lifestyle, so things that you might enjoy, things that are discretionary, so whether that's your gym or other hobbies, and then 20% towards your future or towards your other financial commitments, so paying off debt or saving. Now that's a it's not, it doesn't work for everyone. It's the categories that are more important than the ratios. But if
Mm.
people really think about their budgeting and plan for it, then actually it might well be within the reach of more people than they might expect. Another interesting thing that the research showed is that um, there are many people within this generation that do save, but they would be classed as inactive savers. So not really looking at whether they're getting the best returns for their money. It might be next to their current account, possibly earning very little interest. And actually, if they did a little bit more research and planned a little bit more, they could get a substantial more amount of value back from those savings. We've quantified it. We think it's worth about £226 million a year to this generation of lost interest by not getting the best returns for their savings.
And what sort of things would you be recommending or suggesting they might be interested in doing in order to get a better return?
So I think it's really important to understand how you're likely to manage your money. If you're going to be looking at it weekly or monthly, then there's all sorts of different websites available where you can go and search out the best rates. Chances are though that those best rates might not last for a long time. They may change over time. So if you're someone actually who isn't going to look once a month, it might be once a year or once every 6 months. Do your research on what kinds of companies are going to pay you the best rates over a longer period, um, because then you'll probably be better off over the longer term.
Mm. We talked about cash potentially being king, but also now there's this whole trend towards buy now, pay later, which on the one hand, of course, makes it easier for people to access things, but on the other hand, could be potentially perilous.
I think it can. It's interesting to see how that's developed over the last few years, and particularly when you look at the kinds of websites or shops where it's more prominent. It's fair to say that it is targeted more at a younger generation. I think what I'd say in my role at Yorkshire Building Society as Director of Savings is that rather than buy now, pay later, people should think about budgeting. And actually, that changes it around then. It's save now, buy later, is how I'd encourage people to think. So it's not to say never use those services, but if you
Mm.
can forward plan and budget better, then actually save now, buy later is maybe a better catch line.
Well, I like that slogan. Where can people go for more information, Chris?
So you can come to our website for more information, which is ybs.co.uk, where you can see the more details on the report, but also look at our tools and tips that will help you start that savings habit. Alternatively, if you actually prefer to have a conversation face to face, then we've got a branch and retail network across the UK with hundreds of different outlets where people can come in and have a conversation with one of our colleagues.
Appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. Chris Irwin, Director of Savings at Yorkshire Building Society.